the Italian Mafia king who became obsessed with the black janitor who cleaned his office. Some men build empires. Others inherit them. But the ones you should worry about are the ones who take them by force and hold them in silence. Benigno Onio was that kind of man. And Ruth Williams was mopping his floor at 11:47 p.m. when she first felt him watching. She didn't look up. Not because she was afraid. She just had 3 more offices to finish before her shift ended at 2, and the man sitting behind that mahogany desk wasn't paying her hourly rate. Ruth was 34. Tired in the way single mothers get tired, bone-deep permanent. She wore gray scrubs she'd bought secondhand, white sneakers with the soles wearing thin, and her locks were pulled back tight because loose hair meant loose time and she didn't have any to spare. The bucket squeaked as she dragged it across the marble. Benigno's pen stopped moving. He felt it, that pause. The room got heavier. Most people trembled when he looked at them. Ruth just wrung out the mop and kept working. And something in his chest shifted. Something he didn't recognize. What happens when a man who controls everything meets the one person he can't seem to look away from? Stay with me on this one. Subscribe if you haven't already and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? Now let's get into this. Ruth had been cleaning the Onio Holdings building for 7 weeks before that night. 43 floors of glass and steel in downtown Chicago, right on Wacker Drive where the river bends and the money runs deep. She worked for a contractor called Lakeline Services. 12 janitors rotating shifts across the building, minimum wage plus 80 cents for overnight differential. She never asked questions about what happened on the top floor. That wasn't her business. Her business was the mop, the bucket, the vacuum, and getting home before her daughter Nadia woke up for school. Nadia was 12. Sharp in the way kids get sharp when they grow up watching their mothers stretch $20 into a week of groceries. She asked questions Ruth couldn't always answer, like why they'd moved 4 times in 6 years. Or why her father's name made Ruth's jaw tighten. But that was a different story. A closed chapter. Tonight was Thursday. Ruth clocked in at 10 same as always. Miguel, the security guard at the service entrance, buzzed her through without looking up from his phone. 41 through 43 tonight, he said. They moved the rotation. Ruth paused. I had 36 through 38. New schedule came down this afternoon. Miguel shrugged. Boss man requested it. She didn't ask which boss. Didn't matter. She grabbed her cart and headed for the freight elevator. The 43rd floor was executive territory. Quieter carpet, heavier doors, air that smelled like leather and something faintly metallic she couldn't name. Most of the offices were empty by the time she arrived. Lights off, chairs tucked in, not even a coffee cup out of place. Except one. The corner office. His office. The door was open 6 inches. Enough for light to spill into the hallway. Enough for her to hear the low murmur of a voice speaking Italian, clipped and cold. Ruth hesitated. Protocol said skip occupied offices. Come back later or flag it for the morning crew. Simple. But something made her knock anyway. 2 soft taps against the doorframe. The voice stopped. Come in. She pushed the door open with her shoulder, pulling the cart behind her. Kept her eyes on the floor out of habit, not submission. I can come back, she said. Didn't know anyone was still working. You knew. His voice was low. Not loud, it didn't need to be. The kind of voice that expected silence after it spoke. Ruth looked up. Benigno Onio sat behind a desk that cost more than her annual salary. He was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 40, 42. Dark hair cut short, jaw like it had been carved from something unforgiving, and eyes so black they absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie. The top button of his shirt was undone. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, and that's when she saw the tattoos, dark ink crawling up both forearms, disappearing under the fabric. Not decorative. Deliberate. The kind of marks that told stories she didn't want to hear. His hands were folded on the desk. So, patient. You knocked, he said. Most people don't knock when they think no one's listening. Ruth gripped the mop handle. Most people aren't trying to finish a shift. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like the beginning of one that decided not to arrive. What's your name? Ruth. Ruth. He repeated it slowly like he was testing how it felt. You're new on this floor. Rotation changed today. I know. I changed it. The words landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Ruth didn't blink. Didn't shift her weight. Didn't give him anything to read. Why? She asked. Most people wouldn't have asked. Most people would have nodded, thanked him for the opportunity to breathe his air and backed out of the room. Benigno leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked under him. He was a big man, not just tall but built. Muscle packed onto a frame designed for violence, softened just enough by tailored fabric to pass in boardrooms. Because I wanted to see if you'd ask, he said. Ruth felt something cold move through her chest. Not fear. Recognition. She'd known men like this before. Men who tested you with small things before they took big ones. She pulled her cart fully into the room and started with the wastebasket beside the bookshelf. I'm not here to play games, she said quietly. I'm here to clean your office. That's it. And if I wanted something else? Ruth emptied the wastebasket into her trash bag. Tied it off. Reached for the next one. Then you'd be wanting it from the wrong woman. The silence stretched. She could feel his eyes on her back. Not roaming, not predatory in the usual way. He was studying her. Taking her apart piece by piece and examining what he found. When she finally turned around, he was standing. She hadn't heard him move. He was closer now. Maybe 8 feet away. Close enough that she could see the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. You're not afraid of me, he said. It wasn't a question. Should I be? Everyone else is. Ruth set the trash bag on her cart, pulled out the glass cleaner and a rag, walked past him toward the windows, close enough that she could smell cedar and smoke. Fear is expensive, she said. I can't afford it. She started wiping down the glass. The Chicago skyline glittered back at her, cold, indifferent, beautiful in the way only money could make things beautiful. Behind her, Benigno watched. He watched the way she moved. Efficient. Unhurried. No wasted motion. She cleaned his windows like she'd cleaned 1,000 windows before, like he wasn't even there. And that's what hooked him. Not her beauty, though she had it. Strong features, dark skin that caught the light like polished wood, locks that fell past her shoulders when they weren't tied back. She carried herself like someone who'd been broken once and rebuilt herself without asking for help. It was the absence of performance. She didn't shrink or swell in his presence. He just existed. Like he was furniture. Like he was anyone. Benigno hadn't been treated like anyone in 15 years. Same time tomorrow, he said. Ruth didn't turn around. I don't control the schedule. You do now. She paused. Just for a second. Then she kept wiping. Good night, Mr. Onio. She collected her cart, walked out and didn't look back. Benigno stood at the window for a long time after she left. His reflection stared back at him. A man who'd built a kingdom on blood and silence, who'd buried enemies in shallow graves across 3 states, who answered to no one. And all he could think about was the way she'd said his name. Like it meant nothing. Like he meant nothing. He pressed his palm flat against the glass, feeling the cold seep into his skin. Something had shifted. Something small and dangerous. He wanted to know more. He wanted to know everything. And Benigno Onio always got what he wanted. 3 weeks passed. Ruth cleaned Benigno's office every night. Same time. Same routine. Wastebaskets, windows, floors, surfaces. 45 minutes if she worked efficiently, which she always did. He was there every single time. Sometimes he was on the phone, speaking in Italian or Spanish or something she couldn't place. Sometimes he was reading documents, pen moving across paper in sharp strokes. Sometimes he just sat there watching her work like she was the most interesting thing he'd seen all day. He never asked why. Never engaged beyond the minimum. Good night, Mr. Onio. Good night, Ruth. That was it. That was all she gave him. But things were changing outside that room. Small things. Things she noticed but couldn't explain. Her paycheck came in $40 higher than expected. When she called Lakeline Services to report the error, they told her it wasn't an error. She'd been moved to a specialized cleaning rate. Top floor premium. Her locker in the basement break room was reassigned. New location away from the drafty corner where the heating never worked. Better lock too. The old one had been sticky for months. And then there was the car. Ruth took the blue line home every night. 47 minutes from Clark and Lake to her stop in Auburn Gresham, plus a 15-minute walk through streets that got quieter the later it got. She'd done it for months without incident, but she knew the math. Single woman, 2 in the morning, tired from work. The math wasn't good. One night in late October, she came out of the station and found a black Lincoln idling at the curb. The window rolled down. A man she didn't recognize sat behind the wheel. Middle-aged, thick neck, hands that looked like they'd done damage. "Ms. Williams," he said. "I'm supposed to drive you home." Ruth stopped walking. "Who sent you?" "Mr. Onio." She stood there on the sidewalk, wind cutting through her jacket, and felt something shift in her chest. Not fear. Something more complicated. "Tell Mr. Onio I didn't ask for a ride." She walked past the car. Made it half a block before the Lincoln rolled up beside her, matching her pace. "Ma'am, I'm supposed to make sure you get home safe. And I'm supposed to make my own choices." Ruth didn't slow down. "Go back and tell him that." The car stopped. He kept walking. She made it home 22 minutes later, climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, and found Nadia asleep on the couch with her history textbook open on her chest. Ruth stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her daughter breathe. Then she locked the door, checked the windows, and sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up. The next night, Ruth arrived at the 43rd floor with a decision already made. She knocked on his door. Waited for the low, "Come in." Pushed her cart inside and stopped 3 feet from his desk. Benigno looked up. He was in shirt sleeves again, tattoos visible, reading glasses she'd never seen before perched on his nose. They made him look almost human. "The car," Ruth said. "Don't send it again." He took off the glasses. Set them on the desk. Leaned back in his chair. "The neighborhood you live in has had 3 assaults in the past month. One of them fatal. How do you know where I live?" "I know a lot of things, Ruth." She felt her jaw tighten. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving." Ruth gripped the handle of her cart so hard her knuckles ached. This was the moment. The crossroads. She could walk out, report him to HR, file a complaint, find another job. She could burn this bridge and never look back. But she had a daughter. And rent was due in 9 days. And jobs that paid this well with hours that worked around Nadia's school schedule didn't grow on trees. So instead of walking out, she did something she hadn't planned. She asked a question. "Why do you care?" Benigno's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes moved. A flicker of something she couldn't read. "I don't know," he said. The honesty surprised her. It surprised him too. She could tell by the way his jaw tightened after he said it, like he wished he could take it back. "I'm not a project," Ruth said quietly. "I'm not something broken that needs fixing. And I'm not available in case that's what this is about." "It's not." "Then what is it?" Benigno stood. Walked around the desk. Stopped when there were still 5 feet between them, like he understood that distance mattered to her. Up close she could see the details she usually avoided. The way his shoulders filled out his shirt. The old scars on his knuckles. The single gray hair at his temple that probably drove him crazy. "I've spent the last 15 years surrounded by people who want something from me," he said. "Money. Power. Protection. Favors. They smile when I walk in and count their blessings when I leave. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every relationship is a transaction." He paused. Looked at her like he was trying to memorize something. "And then you walk into my office with a mop and you look at me like I'm just some man working late. Like I'm nobody. Like I don't matter at all." Ruth didn't respond. She wasn't sure what to say. "Do you know what that feels like?" he asked. "To be nobody to someone?" "Yeah," she said. "I do. I've been nobody my whole life." Something passed between them. Not attraction, not yet. Something older. Recognition of a shared wound neither of them wanted to name. Benigno nodded slowly. "The car won't come again. I apologize for overstepping." Ruth studied him for a long moment. Looking for the lie. Looking for the angle. She didn't find one. "Okay," she said finally. She pulled her cart toward the wastebasket and started working. They didn't speak again for the rest of the hour. But when she left, she paused at the door. "The glasses," she said. "You should wear them more. They make you look less intimidating." She didn't wait for his response. Just walked out with her cart rattling behind her. But she heard it anyway. Low and rough, like it hadn't been used in a long time. Benigno Onio laughed. After that night things shifted again. Subtler this time. The car didn't come back. But a security guard named Derek started appearing at the L station around the time her train arrived. Always casual, always reading a newspaper, always just happening to walk the same direction she did until she reached her building. Ruth wasn't stupid. She knew he was on Benigno's payroll. But Derek never spoke to her, never made her feel watched. He just existed. A shadow with a purpose she couldn't bring herself to resent. She thought about confronting Benigno again. Decided against it. There were worse things than being safe. At work, the other janitors started treating her differently. Nothing obvious, just small things. More nods in the break room. Fewer questions about why she spent so much time on the top floor. Someone left a fresh pack of the good trash bags on her cart one night, the thick ones that didn't tear. Ruth kept her head down. Did her job. Went home. But every night at 11:47 she knocked on that door. And every night he was there. They started talking. Not much, just fragments between tasks. He asked about the book she was reading one night when he saw it sticking out of her bag. She asked about the opera music he sometimes played through his computer speakers. Small things. Safe things. But each one felt like a brick removed from a wall neither of them had agreed to build. One night, Benigno was standing at the window when she arrived. Not sitting. Not working. Just staring out at the city like it owed him something it refused to pay. Ruth emptied his wastebasket. Wiped down his desk. Started on the windows. "You don't have to do those tonight," he said without turning around. "It's my job." Ruth. The way he said her name stopped her. Soft. Almost careful. "Sit down. Please." She hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse. To keep things professional. To maintain the distance that protected her. But her feet hurt. And he'd said please. And something in his voice sounded like the way Nadia sounded when she had a nightmare and didn't want to admit it. Ruth sat in the chair across from his desk. Benigno turned from the window. In the dim light he looked older. Tired in a way that money couldn't fix. "I had a conversation today," he said. "With someone I used to trust." Ruth waited. "He's been stealing from me. Small amounts at first, then larger. I've known for 2 months. I was trying to figure out why." "Did you?" Benigno sat down across from her. The desk between them suddenly felt smaller. "His daughter is sick. Medical bills. He didn't want to ask me for help because he didn't want to owe me anything." A muscle in his jaw tightened. He was right not to want that. Ruth understood what he wasn't saying. "What are you going to do?" "What I have to." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Ruth should have been afraid. She was sitting across from a man casually discussing ruining, or worse, another person's life. A man who dealt in violence and silence and debts that couldn't be repaid. Instead she felt something unexpected. Sadness. "That must be lonely," she said quietly. "Always having to be the one who decides." Benigno looked at her. Really looked. Like she'd just said something no one had ever said to him before. "It is." They sat there for a moment. No sound except the hum of the building and the distant traffic 43 floors below. Then Ruth stood, picked up her rag and went back to the windows. But something had changed. They both felt it. The wall had gotten shorter. And neither of them knew how to stop what was coming. November came in cold and mean. Ruth picked up extra shifts when she could. Holiday season meant more overtime, and Nadia needed a new winter coat, the kind with real insulation that didn't come from the discount bin at Walmart. She was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes a home there. But every night at 11:47 she still knocked on that door. And every night he was still there. They'd developed a rhythm now. She cleaned, he worked, and somewhere in the middle they talked. Never about anything too personal. Never crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But the lines were getting blurry. One night Ruth arrived to find a paper bag on the corner of his desk. Brown. Unmarked. The smell hit her before she even got close. Garlic and herbs and something rich that made her stomach clench. "What's that?" she asked. Benigno didn't look up from his documents. "Dinner." "I can see that. Why is it on your desk?" "Because I ordered too much." Ruth stood there, hands on her cart, and felt the familiar push-pull of this thing between them. He was offering her something. And she was supposed to refuse. But she hadn't eaten since noon. A granola bar from the vending machine at the hospital where she dropped off a job application, trying to find something, anything, that paid better than mopping floors. I'm not hungry, she said. Benigno finally looked up. His reading glasses were on again and she hated how much she didn't hate them. You're lying. Excuse me. You do this thing when you lie. He gestured vaguely toward his own face. Your left eye twitches. Just barely. Most people wouldn't notice. You're not most people. No. I'm not. Ruth should have been unsettled. He was admitting to watching her closely enough to catalog her micro-expressions. That wasn't normal. That wasn't safe. But she was so tired. And the food smelled so good. She sat down. Benigno pushed the bag toward her without comment. Inside she found containers of pasta, bread that was still warm, and a salad that looked like actual vegetables instead of the wilted iceberg she bought on sale. She ate in silence. He went back to his documents. It should have been awkward. It wasn't. When she finished, she wiped her hands on a napkin and stood to throw the containers away. Thank you, she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. She wasn't used to thanking men for things. Benigno nodded without looking up. Same time tomorrow. Ruth started her cleaning routine. But halfway through wiping down the windows she stopped. Why do you stay so late? He set down his pen. What do you mean? You own the building. Whatever it is you own. You could work from anywhere. But you're here every night past midnight, doing paperwork like some middle manager with a mortgage to pay. She turned to face him. Why? Benigno was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that Ruth thought he wouldn't answer. Because when I go home, he finally said, there's no one there. The words landed like stones in still water. Ruth understood that kind of loneliness. The kind that made you fill your hours with anything. Work, errands, television left on for background noise. Just so you didn't have to sit with the silence. You could change that, she said carefully. Man like you could have anyone. I don't want anyone. The way he said it made her breath catch. She turned back to the window quickly, focusing on a smudge that wasn't there. The pasta was good, she said, changing the subject. Where was it from? A place in Little Italy. Family owned. Been around since my grandfather's time. Your grandfather? He came over from Sicily in 1952. Didn't speak a word of English. Worked in a shoe factory until he saved enough to open his own shop. He was a good man. Ruth heard what he didn't say. That Benigno wasn't. That somewhere between his grandfather's shoe shop and this glass tower, something had gone sideways. My grandmother came up from Mississippi during the Great Migration, she said. Worked as a maid in Hyde Park for 30 years. Same family the whole time. Did she like it? She liked that it kept food on the table. Liking it was a luxury she couldn't afford. Benigno nodded slowly. Our grandparents understood something we forgot. That work isn't about fulfillment. It's about survival. Some of us never forgot. Their eyes met. Held. Ruth looked away first. He always did. The shift came 3 days later. Ruth arrived at the 43rd floor to find the hallway busier than usual. Men in suits standing in clusters, speaking in low voices. The energy was different, tighter, more electric. Something was wrong. She hesitated at the elevator. Considered going back down, finishing her other floors first. But Miguel had told her Benigno's office was her first priority now. Direct orders. She knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Protocol said leave. Come back later. Don't push. But Ruth pushed the door open anyway. The office was dark except for the city lights bleeding through the windows. Benigno sat in his chair facing away from the desk, staring out at nothing. Mr. Onio? No response. Ruth stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. She left her cart in the hallway. Benigno. His name in her mouth seemed to reach him. He turned his chair slowly. In the dim light she could see the blood on his shirt. Ruth froze. It's not mine, he said. His voice was flat. Not most of it. She should have run. Called security. Called the police. Done anything except what she did, which was walk closer. What happened? The man I told you about. The one who was stealing. Benigno looked down at his hands. They were clean, but she could tell they hadn't been clean an hour ago. He made a choice. A bad one. Ruth stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to see the hollowness in his eyes. The way his jaw trembled almost imperceptibly. Is he dead? No. A long pause. But he'll wish he was for a while. Ruth should have felt horror, disgust, fear. Instead she felt the weight of a man who'd done something terrible and had no one to tell. A man surrounded by people and utterly alone. She sat in the chair across from him. Same as before. Desk between them. Why are you telling me this? I don't know. That's not good enough. Benigno laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just exhaustion. You want the truth? I'm telling you because you're the only person who looks at me like I'm human. Everyone else, they see the name, the money, the power. They see what I can give them or what I can take away. But you... He shook his head. You looked at me like I was just some man working late. And I keep waiting for that to change. For you to see what I really am and run. I'm not running. You should. Ruth leaned forward. Her voice was steady but her heart was pounding. I've seen men like you before. Men who do ugly things and tell themselves it's necessary. Men who build walls so high they can't see over them anymore. She held his gaze. But I've also seen men who were nothing but ugly. All the way through. And you're not that. How do you know? Because you're sitting here in the dark, bleeding on a shirt that costs more than my rent, telling a janitor what you did. Because it's eating you alive. Ruth paused. Monsters don't feel guilt. They don't care who sees them. But you do. Benigno stared at her. In the darkness his eyes were unreadable. You should still run, he said quietly. Probably. But you won't. Ruth stood. Walked to the small bathroom attached to his office and came back with a wet towel. She held it out to him. Clean up. I'll get started on the floors. He took the towel. Their fingers brushed. Neither of them pulled away. Ruth felt the contact travel through her like electricity. Brief. Dangerous. Impossible to ignore. She stepped back first. Returned to the hallway for her cart. Started working like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. They both knew it. An hour later when she was finishing the floors, Benigno spoke again. Ruth. She looked up. He was standing at the window, silhouette dark against the city lights. The bloody shirt was gone, replaced by a plain white undershirt that made him look almost vulnerable. I need you to understand something, he said. What's happening between us, whatever this is, it's not safe for you. The people around me, they get hurt. It's not a matter of if. It's when. Ruth wrung out her mop. Set it against the bucket. I've been hurt before. I survived. This would be different. Maybe. She picked up the bucket, headed for the door. But you don't get to decide that for me. I'm a grown woman. I make my own choices. She stopped at the threshold. Good night, Benigno. She didn't wait for his response. Just walked out into the hallway and let the door close behind her. But she heard him anyway. 3 words spoken so quietly she almost missed them. Good night, Ruth. And underneath even quieter. Be careful. She took the freight elevator down alone. Her hands were shaking but not from fear. Something had crossed over tonight. Some line they couldn't uncross. Ruth didn't know if she was walking towards something or away from it. All she knew was that she was tired of being alone too. And for the first time in years, that scared her more than anything else. December arrived with a snowstorm that shut down half the city. Ruth almost didn't make it to work that night. The blue line was running 30 minutes behind, and by the time she reached the Onio Holdings building she was soaked through and shivering. Miguel took one look at her and shook his head. You should have stayed home. Rent doesn't care about weather. He buzzed her through without another word. Ruth changed into dry scrubs in the basement locker room. She'd started keeping a spare set after the 3rd time Chicago winter caught her off guard. Her reflection in the cracked mirror looked tired. Older than 34. She thought about Nadia home with Mrs. Patterson from down the hall. The older woman charged $20 a night to watch her, which Ruth couldn't really afford, but she also couldn't leave a 12-year-old alone until 2 in the morning. Everything was a calculation. Every dollar, every hour, every choice. She grabbed her cart and headed for the elevator. The 43rd floor was quiet tonight. Most of the executive staff had gone home early because of the storm. The hallway lights were dimmed to half power, casting long shadows across the carpet. Ruth knocked on Benigno's door. Come in. She pushed inside and stopped. He wasn't alone. A woman sat in the chair Ruth usually occupied, tall, blonde, dressed in a red dress that cost more than Ruth's entire wardrobe. She was beautiful in the way that rich women were beautiful. Polished, precise, every detail curated for maximum impact. She turned when Ruth entered. Her eyes swept over Ruth's scrubs, her work cart, her still damp locks. "This is her?" the woman asked Benigno. Her voice dripped with something Ruth recognized immediately. Contempt disguised as curiosity. Benigno's expression was unreadable. "Valentina. Leave. I'm just trying to understand." Valentina stood, smoothing her dress. "You've been distracted for weeks. Missing meetings. Ignoring calls. And everyone's whispering about some woman on the cleaning staff." She laughed, a bright sharp sound. "I had to see for myself." Ruth didn't move. Didn't speak. She'd learned a long time ago that silence was its own kind of armor. Valentina walked toward her slowly. Stopped close enough that Ruth could smell her perfume. Something expensive and floral that probably cost more than Ruth's grocery budget for a month. "You're pretty," Valentina said. In a natural sort of way. "I suppose I can see the appeal. Men like Benigno get bored with sophistication. Sometimes they want something more authentic." Ruth met her gaze steadily. "Is there something I can help you with, ma'am?" "Ma'am." Valentina laughed again. How polite. How humble. She leaned closer. "Do you know what happens to women who get too close to him? They end up either bought off or buried. He's not a man, sweetheart. He's a machine. And machines don't love." "Valentina." Benigno's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I said leave." Something flickered in Valentina's face. Fear maybe. Or resentment. She stepped back from Ruth, adjusting her expression into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll see you at the Moretti dinner next week," she said to Benigno. "Your mother expects you to bring a date. A proper one." She walked out without another glance at Ruth. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence. Ruth stood there, hands still on her cart, heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. "I'm sorry," Benigno said quietly. "You shouldn't have had to deal with that." "Who is she?" "Valentina Caruso. Our families have been connected for generations. She believes she's entitled to more than she is." "Entitled to you." Benigno stood, walked to the window. His reflection stared back at them both. "There have been arrangements discussed. Business mergers disguised as marriage proposals. My mother is traditional. She believes alliances should be sealed with rings and ceremonies." "And what do you believe?" He turned to face her. "I believe I'm done letting other people decide my life." Ruth should have stayed quiet. Should have started cleaning and let the moment pass. But something Valentina said was stuck in her chest like a splinter. "She called you a machine." "She's not wrong." "She is." Ruth released her cart. Stepped closer. "Machines don't sit in the dark feeling guilty. Machines don't order too much pasta just so someone else can eat. Machines don't." She stopped herself. Too close to saying something she couldn't take back. Benigno watched her. Waited. "Don't what?" he asked softly. Ruth shook her head. "Nothing. I should get to work." "Ruth." The way he said her name made her stop. Made her turn. He was closer now. She hadn't heard him move, she never heard him move. But he was there, less than 3 feet away, looking at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "You came here in a snowstorm," he said. "You could have called in. Anyone else would have." "I needed the hours." "That's not why." She didn't answer. Because he was right. It wasn't about the hours. It hadn't been about the hours for weeks. "I don't know what this is," she admitted quietly. "But I know it's not smart. And You're what?" "I'm a single mother with a GED and a mop. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a leaky faucet I can't afford to fix. I take the bus in snowstorms because I don't have a car. I count quarters to make sure Nadia can have lunch money every day." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm nobody." Benigno closed the distance between them. Stopped so close she could feel the warmth radiating off his body. "You're the only person who's ever told me the truth," he said. "The only person who looks at me like I'm not a weapon. Like I could be something else if I tried." "Could you?" He didn't answer. Instead he lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away to stop him to say no. He didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. Tentative. The calluses on his palm caught slightly against her skin. Ruth closed her eyes. This is a bad idea, she whispered. I know. I have a daughter. I can't afford to make mistakes. I know that too. Then why? Because I can't stop. His voice was rough. I've tried. For weeks I've tried to stay away, to keep this professional, to be someone who doesn't ruin everything he touches. But every night I sit here waiting for your knock. Every night I tell myself to end it. And every night I can't. Ruth opened her eyes. He was right there, close enough to count his eyelashes if she wanted to. Close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat. What do you want from me? She asked. I don't know. He swallowed. Something I don't deserve. Something I have no right to ask for. Ask anyway. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Benigno's hand moved from her cheek to the back of her neck. Gentle pressure. Not controlling, inviting. I want you to stay, he said. Not as an employee. Not as someone I'm protecting from a distance. I want you to stay because you want to be here. With me. Knowing exactly what I am. Ruth felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Everything logical said to run. Every survival instinct she'd honed over years of hard choices screamed that this was a trap, that men like him didn't change, that she'd end up another casualty in his wake. But logic wasn't what she felt when she looked at him. She felt seen. For the first time in years, truly seen. I can't promise anything, she said. I don't do promises anymore. They always break. I'm not asking for promises. Then what are you asking for? Benigno leaned in. Fully. Giving her every chance to pull away. He didn't. His lips brushed her forehead. Soft. Almost reverent. One day at a time, he murmured against her skin. That's all. Ruth's hands found the front of his shirt. She didn't pull him closer. Didn't push him away. Just held on. One day at a time, she repeated. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. And then finally he smiled. A real smile. Small and uncertain and nothing like the cold mask he showed the rest of the world. Thank you, he said. Ruth didn't know what she was agreeing to. Didn't know where this road led or how badly it might end. But she was tired of being safe. Tired of surviving instead of living. Don't thank me yet, she said. I'm still going to clean your office. Benigno laughed softly. His hand slid from her neck to her shoulder, then dropped to his side. I wouldn't expect anything less. Ruth stepped back. Picked up her mop. Started on the floors. But everything was different now. The air between them had changed. Tart. Alive. And when she left that night, she stopped at the door and looked back. He was watching her. Same as always. But this time she held his gaze. Good night, Benigno. Good night, Ruth. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. Outside the snow had stopped falling. The city was quiet and white and new. Ruth walked to the L station with his warmth still lingering on her skin. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long time she wasn't afraid to find out. Christmas Eve fell on a Tuesday. Ruth had the night off. First one in 3 weeks. She'd planned to spend it with Nadia, making the honey ham recipe her grandmother used to make, watching old movies on the secondhand TV that only worked when you hit it twice on the left side. Simple. Quiet. But at 6 o'clock there was a knock at the door. Nadia got there first because 12-year-olds moved faster than tired mothers. Ruth heard her daughter's voice, curious and guarded the way Ruth had taught her to be. Who are you? Ruth came around the corner, dish towel still in her hands. Benigno stood in the hallway. He looked different outside of his office. Smaller somehow despite his size. He wore a dark wool coat over a simple black sweater, no tie, no suit jacket. His hands were in his pockets and there was snow melting in his hair. He also looked terrified. I should have called, he said. Ruth stared at him. You don't have my number. I know. That's why I didn't call. Nadia looked between them, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Mom. Who is this? Ruth opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. This is someone from work. Someone from work doesn't show up on Christmas Eve. Nadia crossed her arms. She had Ruth's stubbornness and her father's jawline, a combination that made her formidable beyond her years. Try again. Benigno looked at Nadia. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Recognition of a kindred spirit. You're right, he said. I'm not just someone from work. My name is Benigno. I'm a friend of your mother's. Mom doesn't have friends. Nadia. Ruth's voice carried a warning. What? It's true. You work, you come home, you sleep. Sometimes you read those paperback books with the shirtless guys on the cover. That's it. Ruth felt heat rise to her cheeks. We're going to have a conversation later about privacy. But Benigno was smiling. That small, uncertain smile she'd only seen a handful of times. I like her, he said. Most people don't. Nadia tilted her head. You're big. Do you play football? No. What do you do? I own a company. What kind of company? Ruth stepped forward, putting herself between her daughter and the questions that didn't have safe answers. Nadia, go check on the ham. I need to talk to Mr. Onio for a minute. Nadia held Benigno's gaze for another long moment. Then she shrugged and disappeared into the kitchen. Ruth stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. What are you doing here? Benigno's hands were still in his pockets. He looked at the water-stained ceiling, the flickering light at the end of the hall, the worn carpet beneath their feet. I didn't want to spend tonight alone, he said quietly. I was sitting in my apartment, this place with 12 rooms and nothing in any of them that matters, and I realized I couldn't remember the last Christmas I actually celebrated. He paused. And then I thought about you. Making dinner with your daughter. Being together. So you came here. I know it was wrong. I know I should have asked. I know. Benigno. He stopped. Ruth studied him in the harsh hallway light. This man who controlled an empire, who made grown men tremble, who had done things she didn't want to imagine. Standing in her run-down apartment building on Christmas Eve like a stray dog hoping to be let in from the cold. Have you eaten? She asked. He blinked. What? Dinner. Have you eaten? No. Ruth sighed. Open the door wider. Take off your shoes. Nadia has a rule about outside shoes on the carpet. Benigno didn't move. Are you sure? No. But I'm inviting you anyway. Don't make me regret it. She walked back inside without waiting for his answer. Dinner was strange. Not bad, just strange. Benigno sat at their small kitchen table like he'd never seen a kitchen table before. He held his fork wrong, then corrected himself. Complimented the ham 3 times. Asked Nadia about school and actually listened to her answers. Nadia, for her part, interrogated him relentlessly. Do you have kids? No. Why not? I never found the right person. What about a dog? No. A cat? No. Fish? Nothing. I have nothing. Nadia considered this. That's sad. Nadia. Ruth's voice was sharper now. It's okay, Benigno said. She's right. It is sad. Nadia nodded like this settled something. Then she turned back to her plate. Ruth watched Benigno watching her daughter. The way his eyes softened at the edges. The way his shoulders slowly dropped from their usual rigid line. After dinner, Nadia insisted on showing Benigno her room. Ruth tried to intervene, but her daughter had already grabbed his hand and was pulling him down the narrow hallway. I have a collection of rocks from Lake Michigan. The good ones, not the boring gray ones. And my friend Jasmine gave me this poster of Beyoncé, but it's the Formation Tour one, which is the best one, obviously. Her voice faded as they turned the corner. Ruth stood in the kitchen, hands braced on the counter, trying to understand how her life had arrived at this moment. 15 minutes later, Benigno emerged. Alone. She fell asleep, he said. In the middle of explaining why the blue rock is better than the white rock. Ruth smiled despite herself. She does that. Crashes hard and fast. She's remarkable. She's exhausting. That too. He paused in the kitchen doorway. I should go. Probably. Neither of them moved. Ruth dried her hands on a dish towel. Set it on the counter. Turned to face him fully. Why did you really come tonight? Benigno leaned against the doorframe. In her small apartment he looked impossibly large. But not threatening. Never threatening with her. Because I wanted to see what it felt like, he said. What felt like? Being part of something. He gestured vaguely at the kitchen. The dishes in the sink, the half-empty bottle of wine on the counter, the crayon drawings held to the refrigerator with magnets. A home. A family. Something real. Ruth felt something crack in her chest. A wall she'd been maintaining for years, held together by necessity and fear. It's not always like this, she said. Most nights I'm too tired to cook, We eat cereal for dinner. Nadia and I fight about homework. I fall asleep on the couch before 9. That sounds perfect. It sounds boring. No. Benigno's voice was quiet. It sounds like everything I never had and convinced myself I didn't want. Ruth crossed her arms. Not defensive, protective. Protecting herself from how much she wanted to believe him. I don't know what you think is happening here, she said carefully. But I can't be something you try on to see if it fits. I have a daughter. A life. Responsibilities. I know. And you have, whatever you have. An empire. Enemies. A world I don't understand and probably don't want to. I know that too. So what are we doing? Benigno pushed off from the doorframe. Walked toward her slowly. Stopped when there was barely a foot between them. I'm going to tell you something, he said. And you're going to think I'm lying or crazy or both. But I need you to hear it anyway. Ruth waited. I have spent my entire life taking things. Money. Power. Territory. People. I took because that's what I was taught. That's what survival looked like in my world. He paused. But with you, I don't want to take. I want to give. I want to be someone who gives. And I don't know how to do that. I've never known how. His hand lifted. Hovered near her face. Asking permission. Ruth nodded. His palm settled against her cheek. Warm. Steady. Teach me, he said. How to be the kind of man who deserves this. Who deserves you. Ruth looked up at him. This dangerous, broken, trying man. I don't know if you can learn it, she said honestly. I don't know if anyone can. Let me try. And if you fail? Then at least I failed reaching for something good. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Instead of settling for everything that isn't. Ruth closed her eyes. Felt the warmth of his hand. The weight of the moment. When she opened them, her decision was made. One day at a time, she said. Same as before. One day at a time. She leaned up. Pressed her lips to the corner of his mouth. Not quite a kiss. A promise of one. Benigno's breath caught. Ruth stepped back. Smiled. Go home. It's Christmas Eve. We both need sleep. He nodded. Looked slightly dazed. Can I come back? Tomorrow. Nadia wants to show you more rocks. A surprised laugh escaped him. I'd like that. Ruth walked him to the door. Watched him put on his shoes, his coat. Watched him hesitate at the threshold. Thank you, he said. For letting me in. Don't make me regret it. I'll try not to. He stepped into the hallway. Turned back once. Merry Christmas, Ruth. Merry Christmas, Benigno. She closed the door. Leaned against it. Listened to his footsteps fade down the stairs. In the kitchen the dishes waited. The morning would come early. Nadia would wake up wanting to open presents, and Ruth would be running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee. But right now, in this quiet moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile. Certain. Maybe foolish. But hope nonetheless. January came in quiet. Benigno kept his word. One day at a time. No grand gestures, no overwhelming displays of wealth or power. Just presence. He came to dinner on Sundays. Helped Nadia with her history homework even though his knowledge of American presidents was spotty at best. Sat on Ruth's second-hand couch and watched movies he didn't understand while Nadia explained the plot points he missed. Ruth watched him learn how to be ordinary. It didn't come naturally. He held himself too still, spoke too carefully, moved through her small apartment like he was afraid of breaking something. But he kept showing up. Week after week. And slowly something shifted. Nadia started saving her best rocks to show him. Started asking when he was coming back before he'd even left. Started looking at him the way she used to look at her father, before Marcus Williams became a name Ruth didn't say anymore. That terrified Ruth more than anything else. One Sunday night, after Nadia had fallen asleep on the couch during the third act of some animated movie, Benigno helped Ruth carry her to bed. He stood in the doorway while Ruth tucked the blankets around her daughter. Watched without speaking. When Ruth came out, she pulled the door mostly closed and led him back to the living room. She likes you, Ruth said quietly. The feeling is mutual. That's what scares me. Benigno sat on the couch. The cushions dipped under his weight. Ruth sat on the opposite end, pulling her legs up beneath her. Tell me, he said. Ruth looked at him. At the patience in his eyes. The willingness to wait. Her father left when she was 4, she said. Marcus. We were high school sweethearts. Got married too young, had Nadia too young, fell apart like everyone said we would. She paused. He wasn't a bad man. Just a weak one. When things got hard, he got gone. Where is he now? Atlanta last I heard. New wife. New kids. Nadia gets a birthday card every year with a check for $50. Like that makes up for everything. Benigno was quiet. Processing. She doesn't talk about him, Ruth continued. But I see her watching other kids with their fathers. At school events. At the park. She pretends it doesn't bother her, but I know my daughter. Her voice cracked slightly. I know what it cost her to be left behind. Benigno leaned forward. Elbows on his knees. Hands clasped. I won't leave, he said. You can't promise that. I'm promising anyway. Ruth shook her head. Promises break. People leave. That's just how it works. Not for me. His voice was firm. Certain. When I commit to something, I commit completely. It's the only way I know how to be. And what are you committing to? The question hung between them. Heavy. Important. Benigno met her eyes. Nadia. Whatever this is becoming. I don't know all the shapes it might take, but I know I want to be here for it. He paused. If you'll let me. Ruth felt the weight of the decision pressing down. Every instinct built over years of disappointment told her to protect herself. To keep him at arm's length. To never let anyone close enough to leave a mark. But she was tired of living behind walls. I need you to understand something, she said carefully. Nadia comes first. Always. If this ever puts her in danger. It won't. Let me finish. Ruth's voice was sharp. If this ever puts her in danger or hurts her, or makes her life harder in any way, I'm gone. No discussions. No second chances. I will disappear so completely you'll wonder if I ever existed. Benigno didn't flinch. I would expect nothing less. And I need to know what I'm walking into. Really no. Not the sanitized version. Not the version you tell yourself to sleep at night. A muscle in his jaw tightened. You don't want that. Yes, I do. Ruth. You want me to trust you? Then trust me with the truth. Silence stretched between them. Long enough that Ruth thought he might leave. Might decide she wasn't worth the exposure. Instead he started talking. My father built the Onio family into what it is today. He started with protection rackets on the south side. Moved into construction. Then real estate. Then politics. Benigno's voice was flat. Reciting facts. By the time I was old enough to understand, the violence was mostly behind closed doors. But it was always there. The foundation everything else was built on. Ruth didn't speak. Just listened. I took over when I was 26. My father had a stroke. My older brother was supposed to inherit, but he... Benigno stopped. Started again. Marco was soft. Kind in a way our world punishes. He wanted out. So he left. Moved to Italy. Changed his name. I haven't spoken to him in 9 years. Do you miss him? Every day. The admission seemed to cost him something. Ruth saw it in the way his shoulders tightened. So you became what the family needed, she said. I became what survival required. I made deals with men who would have killed me without hesitation. I ordered things done that I can't undo. I built walls so high that no one could reach me. He looked at her. Until you. I didn't do anything. You treated me like a person. You have no idea how rare that is in my world. Ruth considered this. Considered him. The things you've done, she said slowly. Can you walk away from them? Not completely. The business has legitimate arms now. Real estate, investments, consulting. But there are still entanglements. Debts that can't be paid in dollars. Loyalties that can't be broken cleanly. So you're trapped. I was. Benigno leaned back. I've been working on an exit strategy. Fully. Carefully. It's taken years, but I'm close. Another 18 months, maybe 2 years, and I can step back. Hand the reins to someone else. Keep the legitimate businesses and walk away from the rest. Will they let you? They don't have a choice. I've made sure of it. Ruth heard what he wasn't saying. The threats made, the leverage gathered, the careful architecture of an escape built over years of planning. And then what? She asked. Then I try to be someone worth being. Someone who doesn't have blood on his hands anymore. He paused. Someone who might deserve to sit on this couch and watch movies with a 12-year-old who likes rocks. Ruth smiled despite herself. She's very particular about the rocks. I've noticed. They sat in silence for a moment. Comfortable. Easy. Then Ruth stood. Walked to the couch where he sat. Settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Benigno went very still. I'm not saying yes to everything, Ruth said quietly. I'm not saying I trust you completely, or that I'm not terrified, or that this isn't the most reckless thing I've ever done. What are you saying? She reached for his hand. Laced her fingers through his. Felt the calluses on his palm, the warmth of his skin. I'm saying I want to find out who you could be. Who we could be. She squeezed his hand. One day at a time. Benigno let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. Maybe longer. One day at a time, he repeated. He lifted their joined hands. Pressed his lips to her knuckles. Oh, reverent. Ruth felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not quite happiness, not yet. But the possibility of it. The first green shoot pushing through frozen ground. It's late, she said. You should go. I know. Neither of them moved. 5 more minutes, Ruth said. 5 more minutes, he agreed. They sat there in the quiet apartment, hands intertwined, while the city hummed outside the window and Nadia slept peacefully down the hall. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. When Benigno finally left, Ruth walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, turned back. Next Sunday, he asked. Next Sunday. He leaned down. Pressed a kiss to her forehead. Lingered there for a moment, his breath warm against her skin. Thank you for listening, he murmured. Thank you for telling me. He pulled back. Smiled. That small, uncertain smile she was learning to love. Then he was gone, footsteps fading down the stairs. Ruth locked the door. Checked on Nadia. Climbed into her own bed for the first time before midnight in weeks. She lay there in the darkness thinking about choices. About second chances. About the kind of man Benigno was trying to become. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it would end in disaster. But for now, in this moment, it felt like the first honest thing she'd done in years. She fell asleep with the ghost of his lips still warm on her forehead. February brought trouble Ruth didn't see coming. It started with a phone call at work. She was on the 38th floor, vacuuming an empty conference room, when her cell buzzed in her pocket. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. Hello. Is this Ruth Williams? Who's asking? My name is Detective Angela Monroe. Chicago PD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Benigno Onio. Ruth's hand tightened on the phone. She turned off the vacuum. The silence felt suddenly dangerous. I don't know anyone by that name. Ms. Williams, I'm not trying to cause problems for you. I just need to understand the nature of your relationship with Mr. Onio. You've been seen entering and exiting the building after hours. Your schedule was changed specifically to. Ruth hung up. Her heart was pounding. She stood in the empty conference room, phone clutched in her hand, trying to think. Detective. Chicago PD. Questions about Benigno. This was exactly what she'd feared. The world he lived in bleeding into hers. Threatening everything she'd built. She finished her shift on autopilot. Avoided the 43rd floor entirely. Took the blue line home and sat in the dark kitchen until 3 in the morning, trying to decide what to do. By dawn she'd made her choice. She didn't go to work the next night. Or the night after that. She called Lakeline Services and said she had a family emergency. They gave her 3 days without asking questions. 3 days to figure out how to disappear. She started packing. Quietly. Carefully. A box here, a bag there. Nadia noticed but didn't ask. She'd been through this before. She knew what it looked like when her mother was getting ready to run. On the second night there was a knock at the door. Ruth froze. It was past 11. Nadia was asleep. Another knock. Softer this time. Ruth. It's me. Benigno's voice, low and urgent. Ruth considered not answering. Considered pretending she wasn't home. Considered climbing out the window and never looking back. Instead she opened the door. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, clothes rumpled like he hadn't changed in days. You didn't come, he said. No. And you're not answering your phone. I turned it off. He nodded slowly, taking in the boxes behind her. The bags by the door. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. Ruth stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. She didn't want Nadia to wake up. A detective called me, she said quietly. Angela Monroe. She wanted to ask about you. About us. Something flickered in Benigno's expression. Recognition. Bigger. Fear. Monroe, he repeated. She's been investigating my family for years. She's never gotten close enough to matter. She's close enough to know my name. To know my schedule. To know I've been spending time on the 43rd floor. That doesn't mean. It means I'm on her radar now. Ruth's voice was firm. It means my name is in a file somewhere. It means if she digs deep enough she'll find out about Nadia. About where we live. About everything. Benigno reached for her. Ruth stepped back. Don't. His hand fell to his side. I told you this might happen, he said quietly. I told you my world was dangerous. And I told you Nadia comes first. Ruth's eyes were burning but she refused to cry. I can't do this, Benigno. I can't look over my shoulder for the rest of my life. I can't wonder if every phone call is another detective, another threat, another reason to pack up and disappear. I can protect you. From police? From the federal government? From whoever comes next. Ruth shook her head. You can't protect me from a system that's designed to crush people like me. You know that. Benigno was silent. The hallway felt impossibly small. So that's it, he said finally. You're just leaving. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. No. Ruth's voice cracked. People like you have choices. People with money and power and lawyers on retainer. People who can make problems disappear. But people like me? We don't get choices. We get consequences. He saw the words land. Watched them cut into him. Then let me help, he said. Let me fix this. Monroe, the investigation, all of it, I can make it go away. And what would that cost? More violence? More favors owed? More blood on your hands? If that's what it takes. That's exactly my point. Ruth leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. You think the answer to everything is force, control, dominance. But that's not how I want to live. That's not the example I want to set for my daughter. Benigno stared at her. So what do you want me to do? Just let you go? Yes. The word hung between them. Final. Devastating. Ruth watched something break behind his eyes. Watched the walls go up, brick by brick, as he retreated into the man he'd been before he met her. Fine, he said. His voice was cold now. Distant. If that's what you want. He turned to leave. Benigno. He stopped. Didn't turn around. I'm sorry, Ruth said quietly. For what it's worth. I'm sorry it has to be this way. So am I. He walked down the hallway. Disappeared around the corner. His footsteps faded down the stairs and then there was only silence. Ruth stood there for a long time. Until her feet ached. Until her eyes burned. Until the first gray light of dawn started creeping through the window at the end of the hall. Then she went inside, sat on the couch and let herself cry. 3 days later Ruth found an envelope under her door. No name. No return address. Just a plain white envelope with her name written in precise, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. She read it once. Twice. 3 times. Then she sat down heavily, hands shaking. The letter was from a law firm she'd never heard of. It explained, in careful formal language, that the investigation into Benigno Onio had been closed. All files related to Ruth Williams had been destroyed. No charges would be filed. No further contact would be made. Attached was a notarized statement from Detective Angela Monroe, confirming that Ruth was not a person of interest in any ongoing investigation. At the bottom of the page, handwritten in the same precise script. You were right. Force isn't the answer. I found another way. I won't contact you again. But I need you to know, you changed something in me. Something I didn't think could be changed. Be happy. You deserve it. Be. Ruth stared at the letter until the words blurred. He'd done it. Without violence. Without threats. He'd found another way. She thought about what that must have cost him. The favors called in. The debts accrued. The leverage spent on a woman who'd walked away from him. And suddenly the boxes around her looked different. The bags by the door seemed wrong. The plan to disappear felt like a mistake she'd almost made. Ruth stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city waking up below. He thought about Nadia. About second chances. About the kind of man who would burn down his own advantages just to give her peace. Then she picked up her phone and turned it back on. She didn't know what she was going to say. Didn't know if there was anything left to save. But she knew she had to try. Ruth found him 3 days later. Not at his office. Not at the building on Wacker Drive. She tried those places first, but Miguel wouldn't buzz her up, and the security desk said Mr. Onio was unavailable indefinitely. So she did something she never thought she'd do. She asked for help. Derek, the security guard who used to shadow her walks home, still had her number. He answered on the second ring, listened to her stumbling explanation, and gave her an address without asking questions. "He's not doing good," Derek said before hanging up. "Just so you know." The address led her to a brownstone in Lincoln Park. Old money neighborhood. Quiet streets lined with trees that had been there longer than Ruth had been alive. She stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes, trying to find the courage to climb the steps. It was Nadia who finally pushed her forward. "Mom, it's cold. Either knock or let's go home." Ruth had brought her daughter because she didn't know what else to do. Because Nadia was part of this now, whether Ruth had planned it or not. Because if this was going to work, really work, it had to include all of them. She climbed the steps. Knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. The door opened. Benigno looked worse than she'd ever seen him. Unshaven, dark circles carved deep under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled sweater she was pretty sure he'd been sleeping in. He stared at her like she was an apparition. Like he wasn't sure she was real. "Ruth. Can we come in?" He blinked. Noticed Nadia standing behind her. Yes. Of course." He stepped back. They entered. The brownstone was beautiful in the way only old money could afford. High ceilings, original woodwork, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But it also felt empty. Unlived in. Like a showroom instead of a home. Nadia looked around with her usual sharp assessment. "It's big," she said. "But it's sad." "Nadia." Ruth's voice carried a warning. "It's okay." Benigno's voice was rough. She's right." He led them to a sitting room off the main hallway. There were books scattered on the floor and empty glass on the side table, a blanket bunched on the couch like he'd been sleeping there instead of in an actual bed. Ruth took it all in. The evidence of a man falling apart. "Nadia, can you give us a minute?" Her daughter looked between them. Calculating. "Fine. But I'm exploring. This place probably has secret passages." She disappeared down the hallway before Ruth could object. Benigno watched her go with something like wonder. She's fearless. She gets it from her grandmother. Silence settled between them. Thick. Uncomfortable. Ruth sat on the edge of an armchair. Benigno remained standing like he didn't trust himself to get too close. "I got your letter," she said. He nodded. "Waited. How did you do it? The investigation, Monroe, all of it. How did you make it go away without?" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Benigno ran a hand through his hair. It was longer than she'd ever seen it. Unkempt. "Monroe's been after my family for 8 years. She's built her entire career on bringing us down. But cases like that, they require funding, political support, cooperation between agencies." He paused. "I have relationships with people who control those things. I've never used them for myself. It would have raised too many questions, created too many vulnerabilities. But for you, you spent your leverage. Some of it." Ruth understood what that meant. Years of carefully hoarded influence, burned in a single transaction. For her. For someone who had walked away from him. Why? Benigno finally sat. Across from her, far enough that they couldn't touch even if they wanted to. "Because you were right," he said quietly. "You told me I always default to force. Control. That I see everything as a problem to be dominated instead of understood." He swallowed. "I've been that way my whole life. It's kept me alive. But it's also kept me alone." Ruth listened without speaking. "After you left, I spent 3 days trying to figure out how to make you come back. I planned a dozen different approaches. Threats to make. Pressure to apply. Ways to remove your options until staying was easier than leaving. His jaw tightened. And then I realized, that's exactly what you were afraid of. That's exactly why you ran. So you chose different. I tried to. He looked at her. I called in every favor I had. Every relationship I'd built for 20 years. I made myself vulnerable in ways I swore I never would. And I did it without any guarantee you'd come back. Without any expectation. Then why? Because I wanted to be someone who chose different. Even if you never knew. Even if it didn't change anything. His voice cracked slightly. Because you made me believe I could be. Ruth felt something loosen in her chest. A knot she'd been carrying for weeks. Maybe longer. She stood. Crossed the distance between them. Sat on the couch beside him, close enough that their knees touched. Benigno went very still. Like he was afraid any movement might break the spell. I'm still scared, she said. I'm still not sure this can work. Your world, my world, they don't fit together easily. I know. And I still don't fully trust you. Not all the way. Not yet. I know that too. Ruth reached for his hand. Found it trembling slightly. Laced her fingers through his. But I'm tired of running, she said. I'm tired of building walls and hiding behind them. I'm tired of protecting myself from things that might hurt instead of reaching for things that might heal. Benigno's grip tightened on her hand. Like he was holding on to something precious. Something he was terrified of losing. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try again. For real this time. No disappearing. No running at the first sign of trouble. She paused. But I need you to meet me halfway. I need you to keep choosing different. Even when it's hard. Even when force would be easier. I will. Promise me. He turned to face her fully. Lifted their joined hands to his chest, pressing her palm flat over his heart. She could feel it beating. Fast, urgent, alive. I promise, he said. On everything I am and everything I want to become. I promise. Ruth looked into his eyes. Search for the lie. Search for the angle. Found only truth. She leaned forward. Fully. Giving him time to understand what was happening. Their foreheads touched. She felt his breath on her lips. Felt his whole body trembling with the effort of staying still. Ruth. Her name in his mouth. A prayer. A plea. She closed the distance. The kiss was soft at first. Tentative. Two people learning the shape of something new. But then his hand came up to cup her face, and hers slid to the back of his neck, and something that had been building for months finally found its release. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing harder than before. That was, Benigno started. Yeah, Ruth agreed. It was. They sat there, foreheads still touching, hands still intertwined. What happens now? He asked. Now we figure it out. Together. One day at a time. One day at a time, he repeated. The words had become a promise between them. A foundation. From somewhere deeper in the house, Nadia's voice echoed. Mom. I found a room with a pool table. Can I learn to play pool? Ruth laughed. The sound surprised her, light and free and genuine. I should go supervise before she breaks something expensive. Everything in this house is replaceable. Benigno stood, pulled her to her feet. Didn't let go of her hand. She's not. They walked together toward the sound of Nadia's voice. Through hallways that felt less empty with footsteps in them. Past rooms that might someday feel like home. When they found Nadia, she was attempting to chalk a pool cue like she'd seen in movies. Badly, with chalk dust everywhere. Finally, she said when she saw them. I've been waiting forever. Benigno, you have to teach me. Mom's bad at games. I'm not bad at games. I'm strategic. That's what bad players say. Benigno laughed. The sound was rusty, unpracticed but real. I'll teach you, he said. But you have to promise to practice. Greatness requires dedication. Nadia considered this seriously. Deal. She handed him the chalk. Their fingers brushed. The man who ran an empire and the 12-year-old who collected rocks from Lake Michigan. Ruth watched them. Her daughter, open and trusting in ways Ruth had forgotten how to be. This man trying so hard to be someone new. She thought about her grandmother cleaning houses in Hyde Park for 30 years. About her mother working double shifts until her hands cracked. About all the women in her family who had survived by keeping their heads down and their expectations lower. But survival wasn't living. And Ruth was tired of just surviving. He crossed the room, stood beside Benigno as he showed Nadia how to position her hands on the cue. Felt him lean into her slightly, unconscious, natural, like being close to her was already becoming a habit. "You're holding it wrong," Ruth said to Nadia. "You said you were bad at this." "I said I was strategic. There's a difference." Benigno caught her eye, smiled. And Ruth smiled back. Outside, the city kept moving. There were still problems to solve, dangers to navigate, a world that would never fully accept what they were building. But in this room, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the sound of her daughter laughing, the warmth of Benigno's shoulder against hers, the simple, revolutionary act of choosing hope over fear. One day at a time. That was enough. That was everything. 6 months later, Ruth quit her job at Lakeline Services. Not because Benigno asked her to, he never would have asked, but because she'd enrolled in nursing school, something she'd dreamed about since she was Nadia's age, and the night shifts weren't compatible with her class schedule. He paid for her tuition. She let him, after 3 arguments and a negotiation that ended with her insisting on paying him back once she graduated. He agreed, knowing she would never let him refuse the money when the time came. They moved into the brownstone in Lincoln Park. Slowly, carefully. Nadia got her own room, the one with the window seat, and immediately covered the walls with posters and photos and a growing collection of rocks displayed on custom shelves Benigno had built himself. His hands, Ruth discovered, were good for more than violence. He could build things, fix things, create instead of destroy. She watched him learn who he was without the empire weighing him down. The transition took longer than 18 months, closer to 2 years, with complications and setbacks and moments when Ruth wondered if it was really possible. But Benigno kept his promise. Handed the operations to a cousin who wanted them. Kept the legitimate businesses. Walked away from the rest. It wasn't clean. Nothing ever was. But it was done. On the day the final papers were signed, Benigno came home and found Ruth studying at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around her like a fortress. He sat across from her. Waited until she looked up. "It's finished," he said. Ruth set down her highlighter. "How do you feel?" "Lighter." He paused. "Terrified." "Of what?" "That I don't know who I am without it." He looked at his hands, scarred, calloused, capable of terrible things. That there might not be anything underneath. Ruth reached across the table. Took his hands in hers. "There's you," she said. "The man who watches cooking shows with my daughter and burns pancakes on Sunday mornings. The man who reads to her when she's sick and pretends he doesn't cry at the sad parts. The man who's learning to be soft in a world that taught him hardness was the only way to survive." Benigno's eyes glistened. He blinked rapidly. Looked away. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Probably not." Ruth squeezed his hands. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed. Wet and rough and real. That night, after Nadia was asleep, they sat on the back porch and watched the city lights flicker in the distance. Ruth leaned into him, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "I have something for you," he said. "If it's expensive, I'm going to yell at you." "It's not expensive." He reached into his pocket. Pulled out a small velvet box. "But it is important." Ruth sat up. Looked at the box. Looked at him. "Benigno. It was my grandmother's." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, worn thin with age, with a tiny diamond that caught the light. "She gave it to my grandfather when he arrived in America. She'd saved for 2 years to buy it. She said it was her way of telling him she believed in who he could become." Ruth's throat tightened. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he continued. "I'm not asking for anything except the chance to keep showing up. To keep proving that I can be the man you deserve." He held the box out to her. "But I wanted you to have this. As a promise. As a reminder that someone believed in me enough to give me a second chance." Ruth took the box. The ring glinted in the dim light. She thought about everything they'd been through. The fear and the hope and the 1,000 small choices that had led them here. The risk of loving someone who had been built for destruction. The miracle of watching him rebuild himself into something new. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Benigno's breath caught. "Ruth. I'm not saying yes," she said. "Not yet. But I'm not saying no either." "What are you saying?" She looked up at him. This man she'd met with a mop in her hand and fear in her heart. This man who had watched her like she was the most important thing in his world. This man who had burned down his empire just to prove he could be someone worthy of her. I'm saying one day at a time, she said. Same as always. He smiled. That real smile. The one that had taken months to earn. One day at a time, he agreed. He pulled her close. Pressed his lips to her forehead. Held her like she was something precious, something worth protecting, something he would never let go. And Ruth, for the first time in her life, let herself be held. Some stories end with fireworks, grand gestures, declarations that shake the world. This one ended quietly, the way real things usually do. A woman who refused to be invisible. A man who learned to see. A child who taught them both that family isn't about blood, it's about showing up. Ruth still studied for her nursing degree. Benigno still made terrible pancakes. Nadia still collected rocks and asked too many questions and made them both better just by existing. The ring stayed on Ruth's finger. The question stayed open. The answer came slowly, in small moments, in daily choices, in the steady accumulation of trust. And when she finally said yes, a year later on a Sunday morning over burnt pancakes and spilled orange juice, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just Ruth looking at the man who had learned to be soft and saying the only word that mattered. Yes. He kissed her. Nadia cheered. The pancakes burned beyond saving. It was perfect. 3 years later, Ruth was finishing her clinical rotations when she got a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pause. Made her press the green button. Hello. Is this Ruth Williams? The voice was familiar. Rough around the edges. Who is this? A long pause. And then, my name is Marco Onio. I'm Benigno's brother. The one who ran away. Another pause. I need your help. Someone is trying to kill my brother and I think it might be my fault. Ruth stood frozen in the hospital hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Her ring caught the light. I'm listening, she said. And just like that, the story wasn't over. It was only beginning. Thanks for staying with me through this one. Stories like this, they don't come around every day. The kind that make you feel something. Make you think about the choices we make and the people we choose to become. If this one stayed with you, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight? And which part of Ruth and Benigno's story hit you the hardest? I'd love to know. Until next time.